Hi there, my name is David Gilbert. I'm the freelance program producer for Artcore. I've been working for about a year for the organisation, which obviously is great. So seeing as how we're closed down like every other gallery in the world, we're doing other stuff, and rather than like a lot of the museums and galleries around the world at the moment, giving you a virtual tour of exhibitions, I wanted to show you some of the art that I actually live with, things that I own, I have in my home, and which inspire me. So I live out in the Peak District, sun's streaming in through the window today, and I'm sat in my bedroom, and I want to show you and talk a little bit about a painting that's important to me, which is on the wall behind me. And this is actually a painting by my dad. So I'm going to get a bit closer to the painting and let you have a good look at it while I'm talking about it. So here's a better view of the painting. So as I say, it was painted by my dad, George Gilbert. He is a Scottish artist, has painted all his life. And this is a view of his garden in Crail. I think it's called Crail Garden. He painted this view many, many times in all kind of seasons, so there are paintings of it in snow and paintings like this early in the year, I think. I think it's before the leaves are on the trees, and there's a kind of raking sunlight falling across the garden. So my dad's name is George Gilbert. He was born in 1939 in Glasgow, where he grew up. Last year he turned 80. He's still painting now and exhibiting work, although obviously galleries are closed at the moment. So he was born into a working class family. No one in his family had ever done anything like paint for a living before. His father worked on the railways as an engineer and has travelled all over the country. So he met my dad's mother, my grandmother, when he was working down on the Wirral near Bebington, which is where my grandmother is from. So my dad and his family regularly visited my grand's family down in Bebington, and on one trip they went to the Lady Lever Art Gallery, which is nearby in Port Sunlight, which is where Lord Lever set up his industrial plant, making detergents and soaps and so on. So if you haven't been to the Lady Lever Art Gallery, it really is an amazing place, well worth a visit. The gallery is a sort of neoclassical building, and it's built in the centre of workers' accommodation, which is quite kind of remarkable for 19th century and early 20th century workers' accommodation. The gallery has an amazing collection of 19th century paintings, which is what fascinated my dad, particularly the pre-Raphaelite paintings. He saw pictures by Millet, Ford Madox Brown, William Holdham Hunt, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Edward Burne-Jones, Frederick Lord Leighton, and a whole lot of other great painters. So this was his inspiration, and he was also encouraged by an art teacher at his school who spotted that he had talent. So eventually he went to Glasgow School of Art, where he went from 1957 to 1961, which is also where he met my mum. So they met as kind of in the late 50s at Glasgow School of Art. So my dad was the first person in his family ever to go to university, and did really well doing a year of postgraduate study at the School of Art. When he finished art school, he and my mum had already got married, and he went on to teach in schools in Aberdeenshire, teaching art in Aberdeenshire, Glasgow and Fife for the next 25 years or so. So supporting my mum, who was also a teacher, she taught in primary schools, and me and my two brothers. Eventually in 1989 he decided to pack in teaching and to start painting full-time. He'd been exhibiting quite a lot and was getting quite successful, so it was time to concentrate on the painting. I remember really noticing how fantastically his painting developed over that period. You could see that teaching had really held him back, so turning to painting full-time led to this really swift development in his technique and his style and the amount of work he was able to produce. him and my mother eventually set up a gallery called the Courtyard Gallery in Crail in Fife, which they ran from 1993 through to 2001. The original idea was to show my dad's work, but they also sold lots of work by other established and emerging Scottish artists, as well as crafts, sculpture and other sorts of work, metalwork and so on. They converted a building that had been an old joiner's shop, so the large downstairs space became the gallery, and they had a house above it, lovely house above it, and a studio for my dad at the back. So my dad's exhibited pretty widely in the UK with solo shows, group and mixed exhibitions all over the place. He's had many awards, including 3 major awards from the Royal Society of Painters and Watercolours, which he was elected to in the 1970s, as well as the Royal Glasgow Institute and the Paisley Art Institute. And he's been selected for the Cleveland Drawing Competition, Sunday Times Watercolour Competition and all sorts of other stuff. So my early childhood was in Glasgow, until my family moved to Fife on the east coast of Scotland, just north of Edinburgh, and this became the subject of a lot of my dad's paintings. Fife had been really popular with the group of painters known as the Scottish Colourists. They were kind of principally Francis Cadell, John Duncan Ferguson, Leslie Hunter and Samuel Peploe. I always, when I'm in Glasgow, go to see Francis Cadell's painting The Orange Blind, which is at Kelvingrove Art Gallery. Although it's an interior scene, the focal point of this painting is the sun shining through an orange blind, which creates this kind of incredible vivid patch of colour. The Scottish colourists were influenced by Paul Cézanne in particular, as is my dad, who is a great fan of Cézanne. And all of the colourists trained in France before returning to paint the Scottish landscape. All of them came to Fife at one time or another, which has this beautiful rich golden light and kind of faces onto the Firth of Forth. So this picture is actually painted from the garden of the Courtyard Gallery. In 2001 my parents sold the gallery and moved to the Scottish borders, and then spent a few years in Edinburgh before they eventually returned to Fife some 14 years later or so in 2015. And rather bizarrely they bought the house that's just to the right of the centre of this painting, with the 2 dormer windows on the top of it and the chimney to the right. The whole building there used to be a hotel and then got converted into houses, so my parents now live in the left hand part of that as you're looking at it now. So the garden that you're looking at their current house from actually backs on to the garden of the house that they live in now. So now when they're sat in their house or in their garden, they're looking at the back of the building. It used to be their home and the Courtyard Gallery, which they ran for many years. So I kind of particularly like the idea that if you look at the first floor windows, which you can see there, that's actually my mum and dad's bedroom. So I can imagine that when I'm lying in bed sometimes, I might see them moving about, maybe getting up in the morning while I'm sat in bed drinking my cup of tea. And, you know, I'm kind of keeping an eye on them in a way during what's quite a kind of worrying time, particularly for anybody who has elderly parents. So this painting is an acrylic. My dad, I think, he's a technically brilliant painter. What I kind of really like about his style as it developed when he gave up teaching was that he moved away from this kind of really precise draftsmanship towards a much kind of looser style. So here, although there appears to be a lot of detail in the painting, actually it's quite sort of blocky, and you know, a lot of detail is just suggested. So for example, you know, the light reflecting on the greenhouse, I think it's fantastic. It's sort of a very pale blue, quite kind of thickly applied and quite sort of gestural sort of painting. And if you look at the white building on the left hand side of the painting of the wall, I really love the texture of that. The tiles on the roofs are just kind of suggested, and the grey part you can see up above. Obviously those are slates on the roof, but it's just a block of grey with kind of variations in colour, but there's no attempt there to kind of show you any kind of detail of each individual tile. It's quite sort of gestural and an impressionistic view almost of those buildings. He quite often does this in a lot of his paintings, where the main subject will be painted in a lot more detail than elements that are kind of less important. So you can see the grey roofs in the background and the chimneys are sort of slightly less detailed than the main elements of the picture, with the kind of greenhouse taking and the shed taking central focus. And it seems kind of odd that the main focus of a painting should be a fence with a gate in it, a greenhouse and a shed. Quite sort of insignificant things, really. But I guess what I love about my dad's painting is that he really knows how to look at things. He can see and represent what he's seeing in a way which I think is absolutely wonderful. As I say, it's quite sort of impressionistic. He doesn't need to indicate all the detail of the scene that he's looking at in order to evoke it, but some areas he'll kind of focus on in greater detail. I love how he's painted the wood of the shed and that shadow falling across the front of the shed. There's a kind of level of detail to that which I find really rather beautiful. So the vegetation, you can see there's some, it's early in the year I think, or towards the end of the winter. There are no leaves on the trees yet, but there's some evergreen bushes in the gardens, and again they're quite sort of loosely depicted. So the bush on the left, for example, is almost a kind of blur of dark greens and browns and so on, kind of sludgy colours of vegetation, rather than there being any real detail to that. So I love that I can wake up in the morning and look at this painting. It kind of totally takes me back to that garden. I remember sitting in it when my parents had the gallery there on beautiful summer's days and crisp spring days when I was visiting, and enjoying this view over to the house that they now live in. So this is the kind of first of the paintings I'm going to show you. My mum and dad actually gave it to us as a wedding present when me and my wife Kath got married, so it's also got this kind of sentimental value to it, I guess, but it's a kind of beautiful painting which totally kind of connects me to my dad and to his life as a painter. So I'm going to show you some other work that I have in my house, things that are important to me, I've collected over the years. So hopefully I'll see you again soon.